Welcome to the third round edition of the Prep Football Video Preview. I'm sports editor Gabe Wiston, joined as always by Philip Gardner, Richard Walker. Do things a little bit different this week with three teams left. I'm going to ask these guys, one, an underrated aspect of each of our teams that are left, South Point, Kings Mountain, East Lincoln, and two, a little bit about the opponent that they'll be playing in the next round. So we'll get it going. Start with South Point, who welcomes Asheville into town. Asheville 9-3, South Point 12-1. Richard, first of all, what's a little area of South Point's team that's a little bit underrated, under the radar?
Well, it has to be the defense, and this goes back to the one game that they lost. I mean, everybody in Belmont was jumping out of buildings thinking the defense had gone to pieces, and really, with a few exceptions, their defense has really come to the forefront and done really well for them, and it's hard to pinpoint, and we were talking about this earlier. There's no one particular standout or star on the team, and that's kind of been the way that they've been in recent years, although you certainly can see, looking at Jordan Gilmore at the Citadel and Cameron McGlynn at Elon, there's been some standouts on that unit, but this year you'd have to kind of look at a guy like Darius Steele or James Justice or Tyler Coolidge, and then kind of in the backfield they had kind of a collective effort, but they've held their opponents to 20 points in the playoffs. And those have almost been consolation points because South Orlando was late. You went to the Andrews game. That was after the game had been determined. So they've really tightened up that aspect of it. And really, if you go back further than that, Crest was leading them 21-7. And since then, the defense is not, I don't think, given up. The first team defense hasn't given up any points that mattered.
One touchdown last week.
But, I mean, they've really been tight on defense, and that's, and it fits the old cliche and adage, defense wins championships.
Mm-hmm. Phil, tell me a little bit about Asheville.
Reading a little bit on Asheville and talking to some of the South Point guys about it, they appear to be a really big play team. That's what they were last week, at least against Tuscola when they beat them. And that was a team they had shared the Mountain Athletic Conference title with and came back and avenged an earlier loss. But they seem to be pretty balanced. They've got a quarterback who's passed for almost 1,400 yards. His name's Brandon Whiteside. They've got some big play receivers, Darian Ray and Tyquan Finley. Finley had a 70-yard touchdown reception last week, so that shows you what kind of a big play team they are. But, talking to South Point guys last week, they talked about how they got a combination of big physical guys. They've also got some really quick guys. South Point's faced this team twice before in the playoffs, and most recently 5 years ago in the 2003 3A state semifinal. So South Point knows exactly what they're going up against.
Next matchup would be Anson County comes in 10-3 against Kings Mountain, who's also 10-3. I'll let you start this one off, Phil. Tell us a little bit about Anson County.
This is the team that is harder to find information on just because of sort of where Anson County is located. But Greg Lohr from Kings Mountain told me Saturday evening that they're primarily a running team. He said they mostly run out of the I formation, but they do have the ability to throw the deep ball. And so one of the deep receiving threats he's worried about is Rory. I think Rasan Rory is his name. So he's concerned about that playmaker. As far as the running game, there's a guy named Patrick Polk who had over 100 yards a couple of games ago in the playoffs. Greg Lloyd also says that the defense is pretty fast, and he compares them a lot to Mooresville, the team that Kings Mountain just beat last week.
Richard,
and speaking of Kings Mountain, I mean, the Kings Mountain defense really, because, I mean, if you look at when the fourth quarter started last week, it was 24-14. Mooresville's leading. You've got the state's leading rusher. You'd think that Mooresville had every opportunity and all the advantage going their way, but Kings Mountain scores about the first or second play of the fourth quarter, come back, gets a field goal late to tie the game. And while the score is 41-34, I don't think that was reflective of how well Kings Mountain's defense played. I mean, we all know about Michael Roberts and Joe Chambers and the offensive weapons that Kings Mountain has. But the thing that I've noticed, because I've seen Kings Mountain now 3 times, I saw them against Huss early in the year, I saw them against East Rutherford kind of the middle of the year, and then last week against Mooresville. Their defense is really improving. They've got a guy named Hopper who's a freshman defensive lineman who's really improved a lot. Thomas James, a linebacker, and really kind of impressed me last week. It's hard to say that a team that holds the state's leading rusher to 212 yards is playing really good on defense, but you almost kind of take away, they kind of deceived them on an 80-yard play early in the game, and other than that, for 21 or 22 carries, you kind of live with that against Pinkston because he's such a good running back. But, I would say that Kings Mountain's defense has been kind of an overlooked, underrated part of their game so far this year, and certainly key to their playoff run.
Moving on to the third matchup, Bandy's comes into town after defeating Shelby. Bandy's 7-6, plays a 12-1 East Lincoln team that's obviously on a roll. Richard, kind of along the same line. So
Again, you know, we always talk about the offensive players because that's kind of what in our business gets the headlines and gets all the statistical lines. But
Right.
you know, you're talking about a team that's given up 2 touchdowns in the playoffs, one against each team. And anybody that's followed Lincoln football around here historically, I mean, they have always been, you know, ahead of the curve, you know, with offensive prowess and putting up great numbers. And for them to really kind of shut them down 2 different times this year really impresses me with what their defensive coaches and their defensive players are doing, because, you know, you'd have to go back a long time to see a team to shut down Lincoln that way twice in the same season. So certainly that speaks well for East Lincoln, and we obviously know about how well their offense can play.
East Lincoln doesn't really need a scouting report on Bandy's because they've already played this year.
Right.
And it was a squeaker, 35-28. East Lincoln won that one. That was the second game of the year. It started, you know, the current 12-game winning streak for East Lincoln. But it wasn't easy. I mean, it was tied until 1:49 to go when Josh Wilson, who was the quarterback at the time, ran in from 9 yards out. And so it was a real tough game for East Lincoln. Bandit is all about passing. They've got a guy named Kyle Hauser who's passed for, I want to say, 2,500 yards, 25-67, and 26 touchdowns.
wow.
And so obviously they've got a big-time aerial attack out at Bandy's. But again, last time they played, that was, you know, East Lincoln was coming off a loss to Duke Conover, and I think since then they've really gotten into a groove. But of course, you can say the same thing for Bandy's. They placed 7th in the CVAC, but all of a sudden they find themselves in the third round of the playoffs.
Should be some good battles in the third round. Just to let you know, we'll continue to do these videos as long as we have a team or 2 left, and that'll wrap it up for the third round edition. And we'll hopefully see you next round. And happy Thanksgiving.